What if I told you the reason your life feels chaotic is because your mind is not yours right now? Not your job. Not your family. Not your situation. Just your mind. And the moment you take it back, your entire world changes. Because right now, your mind is reacting instead of leading. It is panicking instead of thinking. It is consuming instead of controlling. And Stoicism was built to fix exactly that. There is a war happening inside every human being. Not a war of weapons. Not a war of nations. But a war of thoughts. Every second, your mind is pulling you in different directions. Fear tells you to stop. Doubt tells you that you are not enough. Anger tells you to react immediately. Comparison tells you that everyone else is ahead. And most people lose that war without even realizing it has started. But the Stoics saw something others didn't. They saw that freedom is not outside of you. Freedom is inside your response. And once you control your response, life can shake you, but it cannot break you. There was a man who had no reason to be strong. Born into slavery, his body belonged to someone else. He was beaten. Controlled. Limited. His name was Epictetus. And yet, he became one of the most powerful thinkers in history. One day, his master twisted his leg so violently that it was permanently damaged. The pain never left him. But instead of becoming bitter, he said something shocking. He said, "You may chain my body, but not my mind." And that became his freedom. Because he discovered something most people still haven't learned. You are not free when life is easy. You are free when your mind is untouchable. Right now, your mind is reacting to everything. Someone ignores you, your mind creates rejection. Someone criticizes you, your mind creates shame. Something doesn't go your way, your mind creates frustration. And suddenly, your entire emotional state is controlled by external events. But Stoicism teaches something radical. Nothing outside of you has power over you unless your mind gives it permission. Imagine holding a remote control for your emotions. But instead of holding it yourself, you hand it to everyone around you. Every comment. Every situation. Every failure. They press buttons, and you react instantly. That is how most people live. But Stoicism says, take the remote back. There was an emperor who ruled the most powerful empire in the world. Marcus Aurelius had everything. Power. Wealth. Authority. Respect. And yet, every morning before leading an empire, he led himself first. He would sit quietly and remind himself. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Think about that. A man who controlled armies. Focused more on his thoughts than his empire. Because he understood something most people miss. If your mind is unstable, your success means nothing. If your mind is controlled, even chaos becomes manageable. Now imagine your emotions are waves in the ocean. They rise. They crash. They disappear. Most people try to fight the waves. Some try to run from them. Others drown in them. But the Stoic mindset is different. You become the ocean itself. Not disturbed by the waves. But aware of them passing through you. Anger comes. You notice it. Fear comes. You notice it. Sadness comes. You notice it. But you do not become them. There is a difference between feeling emotions, and being controlled by them. Most people never learn that difference. There was a man who used to lose his temper very easily. If someone insulted him, he would shout. If someone disagreed with him, he would argue. If something went wrong, he would break down. One day, his teacher did something unusual. He didn't lecture him. He simply insulted him in front of others. The man got angry instantly. The teacher calmly asked, "Who controls you right now?" Silence. Because the truth became clear. If someone else can control your reaction, you are not in control of yourself. That moment changed him forever. Your mind is constantly creating stories. And most of those stories are not real. Someone takes longer to reply, and your mind says they are ignoring you. You make a mistake, and your mind says you are a failure. You see someone succeed, and your mind says you are behind in life. But none of that is reality. It is interpretation. And Stoicism teaches you to separate fact from fiction. Because most suffering does not come from events. It comes from the story your mind creates about events. There was a merchant who lost everything in a single night. A storm destroyed his ships. His business collapsed. His wealth disappeared. People expected him to break. But instead, he said something powerful. Everything I had was taken from me, except what truly belongs to me. His mind. Because he understood something important. If your mind is still strong, nothing is truly lost. You can rebuild wealth. You can rebuild status. But if your mind is broken, nothing else matters. Right now, you might believe your thoughts are who you are. I am not good enough. I always fail. I cannot change. But Stoicism teaches something deeper. You are not your thoughts. You are the observer of your thoughts. Think of your mind like a crowded street. Thoughts are people walking past you, shouting opinions. You don't stop every stranger and argue with them. You let them pass. But most people treat every thought like truth. And that is why they suffer. There is a space between what happens to you, and how you respond. Most people never see that space. Someone says something hurtful, immediate reaction. Something goes wrong, immediate panic. Something unexpected happens, immediate stress. But in that small space, lies your power. The power to pause. The power to think. The power to choose. And the more you train that space, the stronger you become. There was a Stoic who used to practice a strange habit. Every morning, he would imagine losing everything. His money. His status. His relationships. Not because he was negative. But because he was training his mind not to depend on anything external. So when loss came, he was already prepared. That is mental strength. Not avoiding pain, but being ready for it. Your mind is like a garden. If you ignore it, weeds grow automatically. Fear grows. Doubt grows. Negativity grows. But if you take control, you plant discipline. You plant patience. You plant clarity. You plant strength. And the garden you grow determines the life you live. Because a chaotic mind creates a chaotic life. A disciplined mind creates a stable life. Most people wait for motivation to change their life. But Stoicism teaches discipline over motivation. Motivation disappears when life gets hard. But discipline remains when motivation dies. And that is why Stoics trained daily. Not when they felt like it. But especially when they didn't. There was a young man who always said he wanted to change his life. But every time things got difficult, he quit. One day, an older man told him, "You are not weak because life is hard. You are weak because your mind is untrained." That truth hit him deeply. Because he realized the problem was not the world. It was his response to the world. You cannot control people. You cannot control events. You cannot control outcomes. But you can control your interpretation. And that control changes everything. Because once you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, you stop suffering unnecessarily. The strongest version of you is not the one who never feels emotion. It is the one who feels everything, but is controlled by nothing. Anger comes, but you choose silence. Fear comes, but you choose action. Doubt comes, but you choose belief. That is mastery. If you learn one thing from Stoicism, let it be this. Your mind is your responsibility. Not your parents. Not your environment. Not your past. You. And the moment you take responsibility for your mind, you take responsibility for your life. So ask yourself right now. Who is controlling your mind? Because if it is not you, something else is. Fear. Doubt. Anger. Other people's opinions. But you were not meant to be controlled. You were meant to be aware. And awareness is the beginning of freedom. There is something most people never realize about suffering. It doesn't always come from what happens. It comes from resistance. When life says, this is happening, and your mind says, this should not be happening, that gap is where suffering is born. Stoicism teaches a very uncomfortable truth. Reality does not owe you comfort. It simply unfolds. And your peace is not found in controlling reality, but in aligning your mind with it. There was a young soldier in ancient Rome who was afraid of battle. Every night before war, he couldn't sleep. His mind kept showing him images of death. Failure. Pain. Loss. He went to a Stoic mentor and said, I cannot control what will happen tomorrow. The mentor replied, that is correct. The soldier said, then how can I be calm? The mentor asked him one question. What part of tomorrow belongs to you? The soldier thought deeply. He finally said, my courage, my effort, my response. The mentor nodded. Then focus only on that. Everything else is noise. The next day, the soldier still felt fear. But something had changed. He acted anyway. That is Stoicism. Not the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. Most people think confidence comes before action. But Stoicism teaches the opposite. Action creates confidence. You don't wait to feel ready. You act, and readiness follows. Because your mind learns through evidence, not hope. Every time you act despite fear, you teach your mind a new lesson. I can survive this. And that is how mental strength is built. Not in comfort. But in repetition under pressure. Your mind will always try to protect you from discomfort. It will whisper. Don't try, you might fail. Don't speak, you might be judged. Don't start, you might not succeed. But Stoicism calls this false protection. Because what your mind calls safety, often becomes limitation. And what your mind calls risk, often becomes growth. There was a craftsman who was afraid of showing his work to others. He believed it was not perfect enough. So he kept hiding it. One day, an old Stoic told him, you are not afraid of failure. You are afraid of judgment. The craftsman nodded. The Stoic replied. And you are also afraid of growth. That confused him. The Stoic continued. Because if you never show your work, you never improve it. That moment changed everything for him. He started sharing his work, imperfect, unfinished, real. And over time, he became a master. Not because fear disappeared. But because he stopped obeying it. Your emotions are not enemies. But they are not leaders either. They are signals. Anger often signals boundaries are being crossed. Fear often signals uncertainty. Sadness often signals loss. Anxiety often signals imagination running ahead of reality. But signals are not instructions. You don't obey a warning light blindly. You interpret it. That is what Stoicism teaches. Interpretation before reaction. There is a version of you that already exists. Calm. Focused. Disciplined. Unshakable. But it is buried under reaction patterns. Every time you react without thinking, you reinforce weakness. Every time you pause and choose response, you reinforce strength. And slowly, your identity shifts. Not because you changed who you are, but because you changed how you respond. There was a Stoic philosopher who used to say, "No man is free who is not master of himself." At first, that sounds simple. But think deeper. If your emotions decide your actions, you are not free. If other people's opinions control your mood, you are not free. If your impulses override your discipline, you are not free. Freedom is not external. Freedom is internal control. One of the most dangerous traps of the mind is comparison. You look at someone else's success, and your mind immediately judges your own life. But what you don't see is their struggle, their failure, their hidden battles. Stoicism removes this illusion by bringing attention back to your own path. Because your only real competition is who you were yesterday, not who someone else is today. There was a man who constantly compared himself to his friend. His friend earned more money, had more recognition, seemed more successful. He felt small every time they met. One day, he spoke to a Stoic teacher. The teacher asked him, "Do you know what your friend suffers from?" He said no. The teacher continued, "Then why are you measuring your life against a story you do not fully understand?" That question stayed with him. And slowly, he stopped comparing. And started building. Your mind is constantly trying to predict the future. What if I fail? What if things go wrong? What if I am not enough? But the Stoics understood something important. The future does not exist yet. And suffering in imagination is still suffering. Seneca once said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Most of your pain has not happened. But your mind rehearses it as if it already has. And that is why you feel tired without doing anything. There was a traveler who feared storms. Every time clouds appeared in the sky, he panicked. One day, an old fisherman told him, "You are drowning in storms that have not yet arrived." That sentence changed him. Because he realized he was living in imagined danger, not real danger. And slowly, he learned to stay present. Presence is power. Because the present moment is the only place you can act. The past is memory. The future is imagination. Only now is real. And most people miss their entire life, because they are mentally somewhere else. When you take control of your mind, something subtle changes. You stop reacting instantly. You start observing first. You start responding intentionally. And people around you may not understand it at first. Because they are used to emotional reactions. But you become the one who is steady. And that steadiness becomes your strength. There is a final truth Stoicism teaches. You will lose things in life. People. Opportunities. Comfort. Time. That is unavoidable. But what you never lose, unless you give it away, is your mind. And if your mind remains strong, you remain unbroken. So every time life tests you, every time emotions rise, every time chaos appears, remember this. You are not here to control the world. You are here to control your response to it. And that is where true power begins. We'll continue and bring it into the final deeper layer where the message becomes more powerful, reflective, and emotionally grounded. There is a level of peace most people never reach in their entire lives. Not because it is hidden, but because it requires letting go of something they refuse to release. Control over everything. The mind resists this truth. It wants guarantees. It wants certainty. It wants outcomes to be predictable. But life does not offer that contract. And Stoicism begins where control ends. There was a Stoic teacher who walked through a crowded marketplace every day. People rushed, shouted, complained, negotiated, panicked. Yet he remained calm. One day, a student asked him, How do you stay so unaffected by all this chaos? The teacher smiled and said, I do not attend every argument I am invited to. The student looked confused. So the teacher explained. Most of what disturbs you is not forced on you. You choose to enter it. That sentence stayed with the student forever. Because he realized something important. Not every thought deserves attention. Not every situation deserves reaction. Not every emotion deserves obedience. Your mind is always open. Open to opinions. Open to fears. Open to distractions. Open to negativity. And if you do not guard it, anything can enter. Stoicism is mental gatekeeping. You decide what enters your mind, and what stays outside. But most people do the opposite. They let everything in, and then wonder why they feel overwhelmed. There was a young man who used to wake up every morning and immediately check his phone. Before he even spoke to himself, the world spoke to him. News. Opinions. Drama. Comparison. Noise. By the time he got out of bed, his mind was already disturbed. One day, he tried something different. He sat in silence for 5 minutes after waking up. No phone. No input. No noise. Just awareness. At first, it felt uncomfortable. But then something changed. His thoughts slowed down. His mind felt lighter. And for the first time, he realized. He had been letting the world control his mind before he even started his day. That is how most people live. They wake up and immediately surrender control. Stoicism teaches something different. You claim your mind first, before the world touches it. Because if you don't lead your mind early in the day, the world will lead it for you. Another powerful Stoic truth is this. You cannot choose what happens, but you can always choose what it means. Two people can experience the same event, and walk away with completely different lives. One sees failure. The other sees feedback. One sees rejection. The other sees redirection. One sees loss. The other sees lesson. The event is the same. But the interpretation is different. And interpretation is everything. There was a man who failed an important business deal. He lost money. Reputation. Confidence. For weeks, he was broken. Then he met an older Stoic-minded businessman. The older man asked him, "Did you lose the lesson as well?" The younger man said, "What do you mean?" The older man replied, "If you only lost money, you are still ahead. But if you lost the lesson, you truly lost everything." That shifted his entire perspective. Because suddenly, failure was no longer an end. It was data. Stoicism is not about emotional suppression. It is about emotional intelligence under pressure. It allows you to feel deeply, without losing direction. To experience pain, without becoming it. To face fear, without obeying it. That is strength most people never develop. There is something powerful about a calm mind. It sees clearly when others panic. It speaks carefully when others react. It moves strategically when others rush. And in life, clarity is advantage. Because most people are not defeated by lack of ability. They are defeated by lack of mental clarity. Your mind will try to pull you into extremes. All good or all bad. All success or all failure. All hope or all despair. But Stoicism teaches balance. Nothing is permanent. Nothing is absolute. Everything is temporary. Even your current struggle. Even your current fear. Even your current confusion. There was a Stoic who lost his home in a fire. Everything burned. People expected him to collapse emotionally. But instead, he said, "Today I am reminded that I own nothing, and therefore nothing owns me." That perspective is not denial. It is freedom. Because when you are attached to nothing, you cannot be destroyed by loss. Most suffering comes from attachment. Attachment to outcomes. Attachment to expectations. Attachment to how life should be. But life does not follow your script. And the more tightly you hold on to expectations, the more pain you feel when reality deviates. Stoicism teaches flexibility of mind. Not rigidity. There was a farmer whose crops failed due to drought. His neighbors panicked. But he remained calm. When asked why, he said, "I do not control rain. I only control preparation." Months later, when rain finally came, his land was still stable. Because while others complained, he adapted. That is Stoic thinking. Adaptation over resistance. Your mind becomes powerful not when it avoids difficulty, but when it remains stable inside difficulty. That is the difference between reacting and mastering. Between surviving and leading. Between emotional chaos and mental discipline. At the deepest level, Stoicism is not just philosophy. It is identity training. You are no longer someone who reacts automatically. You become someone who observes first, then chooses. That shift changes everything. Your relationships. Your decisions. Your future. So here is the final truth. No one is coming to control your mind for you. No system. No teacher. No circumstance. It is your responsibility. And every moment gives you a choice. React, or respond. Obey emotion, or observe it. Lose control, or reclaim it. If you have watched this far, you already understand something important. Awareness alone is not enough. You must practice it. Day by day. Moment by moment. Because Stoicism is not learned. It is lived. If this video gave you clarity, subscribe to the channel for more Stoic teachings that strengthen your mindset. Share it with someone who is mentally overwhelmed or emotionally lost. And comment below. What is the biggest mental battle you are facing right now? Because speaking it is the first step to mastering it. And remember this. Your circumstances will change. But your mind is the foundation. If you take control of that, nothing outside you can control you again. Take it back.